Hello, my name is Eric, and welcome to this week's video lesson. Today we're going to explore what causes floods. Today's lesson is taken from Unit 7.2 in your book, that's page 94 and 95. But before we get into the book, let's have a look at a picture. So think about these questions. What's happening in this picture? Where did all that water come from? Where will the water go? How do the people feel about this situation? And do you think anybody is responsible for the situation? Now, I'm not going to answer these questions for you right now, but throughout this lesson and the next lesson, we will explore all of these questions. So our goals for today, we want to understand the factors that lead to flooding, and also know which factors are natural and which are caused by humans. So let's start with, what are floods? Well, I'm sure you've all experienced some flooding sometime, but floods occur when water overflows the river's channel. So look at this diagram. So number one, here the river is flowing in its channel. The channel is the path that the river cuts out, and the river stays in its channel. Alongside the river is the floodplain. This is the area of low, flat land that will likely flood if the river overflows. In this particular situation, there are homes built in the floodplain, so people are living here. So number two, it's been raining heavily for weeks. The channel filled right up, and now the water has overflown. That means trouble for some of these people. Their homes have been flooded. So, what causes floods? Well, most floods are caused by heavy rain. The rain quickly finds its way to the river, as this drawing shows. So remember, water reaches the river in three ways: through surface runoff, which is fast, and through flow and groundwater, which are slow. So when it's raining very heavily, a lot of that rain doesn't have time to soak into the ground, and it will flow very quickly over the surface and fill the river up quickly, causing it to flood. And that means trouble for people living or working near the river. It's not just heavy rain, floods can also be caused by melting ice or snow. Flash flood means a burst of heavy rain that causes a sudden flood. So it happens quickly, suddenly, so we call it a flash flood. This happens so fast that people get no warning and people can get trapped and drown. Let's look more closely again at this diagram. So number one, it's raining very heavily. Two, the rain can't soak into the ground fast enough, or perhaps the ground is already too wet to take in any more water, so it runs over the surface. It flows into the river level rises, and it floods. So adding to the flood risk, heavy rain is the main cause of floods, but anything that stops the rain soaking into the ground will add to the flood risk. Remember, soaking into the ground means infiltration. Now, infiltration happens slowly, so if there's a lot of rain, it won't have time to soak up all of that water. So let's have a look at the drawing on the next page. So these are some factors that contribute to flooding. So as we saw, heavy rain is the main cause of flooding. If there's been a lot of rain lately, the soil will be soggy. Soggy means very wet or full of water. Another way to say that is saturated or soaked. So when more rain arrives, it cannot soak up anymore. Impermeable rock. So some areas have impermeable rock. This is rock that does not let water pass through. Granite is an example of impermeable rock. So if this is just under the soil, the water cannot be absorbed and it will just run over the ground instead and quickly enter the river. Similarly, steep slopes. So rain will run down a steep slope quickly. Gravity will pull it down very fast before it has a chance to soak through the ground. Steep means at an angle that rises sharply, and the slope is the side of the hill or the mountain. So in this diagram we see the steep slope. It's harder for the climber to climb. Next, tributaries. Remember, a tributary is a smaller river that joins a larger river. And the more tributaries the river has, the greater the chance of flooding because of all that extra water. Built up areas, this means towns and cities. Rain cannot soak through concrete. Concrete is impermeable. Now, concrete is a strong grey building material made from cement and sand. So, if rain cannot soak through the concrete, instead, the rain that falls in our streets runs down the street drains and is quickly carried away to the river, and this causes the river to swell. Swell means to become bigger or to have more volume than usual. But if the drains are blocked, streets can flood quickly, even if they are not near the river. A drain is the pipe that will carry the water away. Here we see pennywise down the drain. Here is a block drain. This is a common situation I see in the streets here. The drains get blocked with garbage, so when it rains heavily, it cannot drain away. Instead, the street will flood. And finally here, loss of trees. Another way of saying this is deforestation, cutting down of forests. So what's the problem with loss of trees? Well, trees are very useful in fighting flooding because the leaves catch the rain. Some of the rainwater will drip and trickle slowly to the ground. So this slows down the water reaching the ground and in turn getting to the river. Some of the water that lands on the leaves and the branches will evaporate, so it never reaches the soil. In addition, tree roots take in a lot of water from the soil. So in these ways, trees help to prevent flooding. So if we cut down the trees, we increase the chances of floods. And building on the flat floodplain. Now the floodplain is the flat land around the river, and this will flood naturally when it gets too full. But if we build here, we're not increasing the risk of flooding, but we're making the flooding a problem for us. If it floods on the floodplain and nobody lives there, it's not a problem. It's just a natural phenomenon. But if we build our houses there, well then we're creating a problem for us. So now your turn. These sentences explain how a flood occurs. Here they're in the wrong order. So in your notebook, you're going to copy them and put them into the correct order. So we'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So please pause the video now and write these sentences in the correct order, and then we will check. Okay, if you've finished, we'll check. First one, heavy rain falls for a long time. The result of all that heavy rain is the ground gets soaked or saturated. Because the ground is soaked, it cannot absorb any more water, so infiltration slows down. If there's less infiltration, then more rain will run over the ground and into the river, so surface runoff increases. If all this water is entering the river very quickly, the river will fill up with water, and finally, the water rises over the banks, and we have a flood. Next, also in your notebook, you're going to draw a mind map to show all the factors that contribute to flooding. Also add some simple illustrations, some drawings that will help you to remember these factors later. So your mind map will look something like this. I'll give you two examples. One is heavy rain, and the second is deforestation. So you will complete the mind map by yourself in your notebook, and when that is finished, you will highlight or underline all the human factors in one color and all the natural factors in a different color. So for my examples, I've used green for natural, so heavy rain is a natural factor, and red I've used for human, deforestation is man-made. So let's review the main points of this lesson. First of all, a flood is usually caused by a river overflowing. Most floods occur in the floodplain. The main cause of flooding is heavy rain. So when the rain falls too heavily and quickly for the ground to absorb, or when the ground becomes too saturated to soak up any more water, or when any other factors such as impermeable rock, steep slopes, or concrete prevent infiltration, surface runoff will increase and quickly fill up the river, causing it to overflow. We have a flood. Deforestation, cutting down trees, leads to flooding because leaves catch the rain. We call this interception. So the trees act like an umbrella. They intercept or they catch the rain before it reaches the ground. This slows its journey to the ground, and some of that rainwater will not reach the ground at all. Instead, it will evaporate from the leaves. Tree roots also absorb a lot of water from the soil. Urbanization, that's the building of towns and cities, leads to flooding because the water cannot penetrate the man-made surfaces of concrete and asphalt. Asphalt is that black surface we see on the road. So if the water cannot penetrate it, there's much less infiltration and a lot more surface runoff. That surface runoff goes down the street drains and straight to the river, causing the river to fill up quickly and potentially overflow. However, if the drains are blocked, the streets can flood during heavy rain, even if they are far from a river. So that is the end of this week's lesson. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again next week. Take care and goodbye.